Tonight, we continue with part 2, and the finale part of the Eastern Dogman Encounters in the United States series. 11 hair-raising encounters ranging from Pennsylvania all the way to Maryland. Some of these stories even connect with one another, making it even more terrifying. Are you ready? Story 1. 2017. Not sure what it is. My girlfriend and I were hiking around western Maryland, and I started getting an eerie feeling, and I seen something following and stalking us. But it wasn't as big as what I'd heard these dogmen to be. Also, there's a little equipment yard where I work sometimes on vehicles, and behind the yard is a cornfield, and it had been cut down, and in the middle of this field is an island of trees. While I was working one afternoon, I heard what sounded like 50 wolves howling at once. I turned around and seen something crouching down, very low to the ground, coming out of the island of the trees. It looked a lot like the thing had been following my girlfriend and I, but that was at least 20 miles away. Also, there's an area nearby where my father told me that he and his friends would see this wolfman thing running next to their vehicle in the 1960s, and supposedly had killed a lot of livestock in the area. I came across this article of something called the Snarly Yow. It was on the same mountain my father has all these werewolf stories about. I would try to get you the article. The area around Hagerstown, Maryland. Story 3. I have a sighting to report. My old neighbor, who committed suicide shortly after his experience, came to me with his experience. We were both registered Maine guides for hunting, fishing, and recreation. Guiding in Maine is a serious business. The criteria are strict, and guides are expert woodsmen with years of outdoors experience. Anyway, he confided in me about this sighting. He was hunting on his own property during deer season of 2011. So for those that aren't familiar with hunting season, specifically with deer, that generally falls in October-November. The property is located on the Jefferson-Washington town lines, which are also the Knox-Lincoln County lines in Maine. The particular property is a Christmas tree farm and is private property. My friend was watching a run where deer regularly traveled, cutting through his property. He observed for a minute a bipedal creature walking with its upper body well above his Christmas trees. It had a wolf's head, was muscular and covered in hair, but walking like a man. At the end of the sighting, the creature dropped to all fours and took off down the run. He was shaking when he told me the story, and based upon my few years working in law enforcement, I don't believe he was lying. Both of us guided for bear hunters at the time, and I know he was very familiar with bears, and Maine wildlife in general. He made a particular emphasis on the pointed ears. He said it looked like a werewolf. In Maine, people do see these things, and generally call them wendigos. After that sighting, I carried a firearm going to my barn that night. I am certain that he told me the truth. Unfortunately, he, for some reason, committed suicide shortly after he told me about the sighting, which was very fresh at the time. The area has some large tracts of woods, with very limited access due to it being private property. There is a stream passing through the area, and some high ridges. Also, old cellar holes and stone walls are scattered throughout the forest behind the property. Food sources are plentiful in the area, with old apple trees, berry patches, deer, turkey, etc. Bears are present in the area, but not in huge numbers. Moose are also present, but again, not in huge numbers. While I still own a house in a very near spot, I have moved to South Dakota and have no intention of moving back to Maine ever, due to political economic reasons, of course. I'm curious if other Maine folks have seen these things, It seems to me that people have, but always in hushed conversations about an uncle. Story 4. The Martin family had downsized their lives. A workplace injury had devastated Eric, and Shelley had left her job to take care of her husband. As a result, they were looking for a less expensive place to live. Shelley had found a beautiful older farmhouse in Palmyra that was just what they needed. It was surrounded by dense woods. Eric's family had always been hunters, and his fairly extensive collection of guns was a bone of contention with Shelley. With the help of Eric's son, Sean, Eric built a strong box to hold the guns under lock and key in the barn. Eric and Shelley had a routine of evening coffee on the sheltered porch, provided it wasn't too cold out. One night, they noticed strange pulsating lights down past the tree line. At first, Sean thought it was just a poacher with a flashlight, but something didn't seem right. Shelley thought it was unnatural. Eric and Sean headed out to the field to investigate further. As they approached the woods, the lights went out. It was so quiet, the snap of a tree branch underfoot echoed. Eric sent Sean around with his flashlight op, hoping to catch any potential poacher unaware. Eric felt something far beyond any fear he'd ever felt hunting. All Eric and Sean found was each other. Not even a track on the ground to give them a hint of what they'd seen. Chelsea's boyfriend Nathan came for a visit, and they decided to go for a walk in the woods with the dogs. The dogs ran out ahead of them, catching a scent. When Chelsea and Nathan caught up, the dogs were rooting around by a large hole in the ground. Nathan thought the overly round hole had been dug with care. Chelsea had a bad feeling about the whole thing and urged him to leave. Finally, he did agree. What had the dogs found? It was Memorial Day weekend, and Shelley was making the evening coffee. The dogs didn't want to go outside to their pen. Something wasn't right. Eric noticed that it was particularly quiet on this misty evening. When Eric heard an odd sound in the distance, he knew there was some sort of danger out there. Eric began to usher Shelley into the house. She protested, but when she heard some rustling in the distance, accompanied by 5 sets of eyes looking back at them, she realized the danger. They rushed into the house and locked the door. Eric knew it wasn't a bear, but it was huge and dangerous. The guns were all the way in the barn, and Eric wasn't sure his family was safe in the house. Eric wanted to go get the guns, but Shelley told him to stay. She went up to Chelsea's room and woke her daughter. Chelsea was half awake when she looked out the window, but laid back down and went back to sleep. All 5 of the creatures were still there. One stood on its hind legs and looked right at Shelley. Eric felt an instinct to protect his family. With the creatures in the distance, he thought he might be able to get the family car backed up close enough to get them out. Even with his disability, Eric went outside. Shelley went through the house, closing all the windows. She finally found the 2 hunting dogs hiding in a shadowed corner. If the dogs were scared, Shelley was concerned. When Eric reached the porch, he realized that he might have the distance to get there. It was going to be the longest 20 feet of his life. He started to slowly walk toward the car. When he finally reached it, grabbing the keys and trying to unlock the door, the motion sensor lights popped on. Eric was frightened and very vulnerable in that very moment. Suddenly, he was face to face with one of the creatures. It tried to reach into the light, but something stopped it. It bolted off into the darkness. Eric made for the house as quickly as he could. They decided to call the police immediately, hoping for someone else to drive in while they remained sheltered. The police didn't take them seriously, telling Shelley to close the windows and lock the doors. Nobody was coming. They were entirely on their own. Shelley heard them approach. They were on the other side of the outside wall, and if they wanted in, they were going to get in. Her family was being held hostage in their own house by these beasts. They weren't able to get the guns. There weren't any police coming. What were they going to do? grabbing every sharp implement they could find. Shelley went and woke up Chelsea. They needed all hands awake and alert. They all went to the master bedroom and laid on top of the bed, armed and waiting on daylight to come. When they heard the creatures outside, they were petrified. The only thing between the Martins and the creatures was the bedroom window now. When morning came, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The creatures were gone. Eric called Sean, who came over and helped look for tracks. The tracks they did find were huge, with enormous claws. They showed a creature who could walk on 2 feet. These creatures had been hunting and stalking. Were they werewolves? To this day, nobody knows. Story 5. 2001. I'm a night owl. I always stay up late at night and watch TV. I just happened to look out my window one night and saw what I initially thought was a man sitting on a roof. I thought it was a man because, at first, he looked almost naked, until I saw the hair or fur on him. He then turned his face, and what I saw then was frightening. He had a pointed ears like a dog and a long snout. They were almost like a German shepherd's ears. I could not understand what I was looking at. I just stared at him for a few minutes. I felt like if I moved, it would see me. It just sat there on its butt, with human-looking arms and legs, but with hair or fur covering them. I backed away from the window very slowly and went to tell my husband. He didn't want to get up and go look because he thought I was imagining it. I went back to the window and it was gone. I don't know or understand what I saw that night, but I did tell my husband and kids what I saw. It has haunted me for many years until I was just telling a few of my grandchildren recently at camp. One of them got on the computer and found some pictures of what they thought I meant. It was terrifying. I was looking at the same thing I saw on the roof that night. I cannot believe it. As I sit here looking at that picture, I did not know it really existed many, many years ago. Story 6. November 1987. I was hunting during doe season in the woods. I parked my truck on a side road in Washington County, but it was right on the border near Greene County. Anyway, I was in a tree stand looking for deer and heard a lot of rustling leaves near me. I then saw this wolf-like thing running on its hind legs. It stopped for a moment, sniffed the air, and then ran off. I sat there in that tree stand for hours till the sun was high in the sky. Then I cautiously returned to my truck. I gave up hunting after this experience. Story 7. Date unknown. An eyewitness was driving home from work on Route 66 near the Green Gage Mall around 9 p.m. His headlights picked up a large canine-looking creature running across the road. When it reached the side of the road, it dropped to all fours and crawled under a fence that surrounded a power transformer. The eyewitness stated that the creature had a snout like a dog and was covered in hair. The eyewitness pulled over and grabbed his flashlight, went around the fence site and found a dugout area about 2 feet deep at the fence. Story 8. Date unknown. A woman and her daughter were out walking their dog in the evening by a cemetery before dark, right before a thunderstorm. The daughter got bored and decided to go back to the vehicle and wait for her mom to finish the walk. While in the car, she saw a bipedal werewolf with a snout that was about 5 feet tall in height, that had grayish fur and darkened eyes. The creature came out of the bushes and then walked around the vehicle once and went back into the bushes. It made eye contact with the daughter, who was frozen in terror. When the mother returned to the car, the daughter was hysterical with fear. The mom believes the daughter and doesn't think she was lying. They seem to think that it is a possible situation, that the approaching thunder electrical storm was used as an energy source by the creature to manifest into this world. This cemetery is on the outskirts of town in a rural area. Lots and lots of woods and creeks. Great habitat for it. Daughter was absolutely certain that the creature was not a Bigfoot. It had a wolf-like snout and very wolf-like features. This area of Pennsylvania has a lot of weird witchcraft and other strange phenomenon. Story 9. In the fall of 1991, between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m., the eyewitness, after spotlighting for deer, came home and went looking for his friends and found them by the old water company. His friends had told him that they had just seen this creature. They shined the spotlight after hearing the noise and saw the creature standing by a telephone pole. Again, the wolf-like creature was standing on 2 legs. It ran into the woods and they did not see it again. The next day, they took a measuring tape and measured from where the creature's head was, just under a spike in the pole, and it measured 7 feet from the ground. The Mercer County area has been a hotbed of Dogman sightings since the 1960s, with many of the sightings coming from the Shenango Reservoir. Story 10. 2007 and 2010. My husband was on his way to work around 4 a.m. on a rural road, while rounding an S bend when his headlights hit a large, dark brown figure that was sitting about 30 feet off the road, watching the road intently. He described the figure as about 4 feet tall, sitting with legs bent out in front of it, wolf-like face and large pointed ears. Although does not remember eyeshine, it was leaning back on human-like arms. My husband immediately felt endangered and floored his vehicle accelerator. This man has no fear of humans. I've known him for 30 years and have never seen him afraid of a natural being. He's hunted and fished since childhood. It took him a couple of years before he told me about this sighting. He said his first thought was that this thing can catch his car, rip me out and eat me if it wants to. He was paranoid and had his head on a swivel all that day. Still though, to this day he cannot drive past that location without feeling something weird. The second sighting occurred in 2010 and happened to a coworker. I noticed she was acting strangely whenever we talked about spooky things, so I asked her what was up, and she said, "Okay, don't think I'm crazy." Then she went on to tell me how one night she was driving home from a late second shift between midnight and 1 a.m., about 5 or so miles from where the first sighting had occurred. She had to slow down to a near stop to turn onto a road that would take her home. That's when she began to hear what sounded like running alongside her car. That's when she glanced out her driver's window and saw the most horrible, evil-looking wolf face. Her first thought was that it was a werewolf. She described it as being black and gray in color, with very large teeth. She said she didn't look again, but could hear it running next to her car until she reached roughly 50 miles an hour. That's no joke on a back road. She was scared out of her wits. After arriving home, she ran to the door, dropped the keys, went inside, closed all the curtains, and did not sleep a wink that night. We're both nurses, and I've known her for about 7 years. She grew up in New York and is not a storyteller. Neither of these people like to talk about their sightings. You can see a change in them when encounters are brought up. I don't need to see one to believe them. I know they exist. Story 11. The Shenango Valley, nestled in Mercer County, is a scenic wonder. The tranquil waters of the Shenango Lake belie the fact that a legendary creature may stalk the surrounding countryside. Strange sightings of an unknown animal began to occur around the mid-1950s and continue possibly through the present day. The local residents dubbed this creature the Shenango Valley Werewolf. Margie was walking with her mother and several young friends when suddenly, from behind her, she heard a howling noise. Quickly, she turned around and stared in horror as the figure was running toward her on all 4 legs. When the creature reached her, it stood up on its hind legs and grabbed her and started to pull her down the road. Her mother, who was standing only several feet in front of her, grabbed Margie's hand and quickly yanked her away from the strange beast. The creature quickly turned and ran back down the gravel road from where it came. The creature was again spotted several days later near an abandoned house at the end of the road where the initial sighting took place. This time, the creature was seen to be wearing a blue shirt and pants. The creature, after being observed, quickly ran away into the woods. The creature was dubbed Dog Boy by the locals in the 1950s throughout the 1970s. Sightings of this creature were rumored to have been seen throughout the area. Sometimes it had been seen by the Shenango Lake, while other times, loud howls were heard throughout the entire area. Flash forward to 2010. Our research group, the Center for Unexplained Events, had a vendor table at a local paranormal conference. The event, dubbed MAPS-Con, which is Mysteries in Paranormal Society, was nearing completion when Margie came over to our table and read the flyer. "Have you seen this creature?" On the flyer was a depiction of a canine looking werewolf creature. "I saw something strange like that," Margie had stated. We went on to interview her, and she explained her encounter to us. She described the creature as follows. The creature was dark brown, about 4 feet tall, and hair covered over the entire body. One of its arms appeared to be almost deformed. The hands seemed cloven. The face appeared flat. The one feature that stood out was the eyes. The eyes appeared to sag. In June of 2014, we went to the location of sighting in Jefferson Township, Mercer County, Pennsylvania, and photographed the sighting area. The questions remain: what did she and all of the other eyewitnesses encounter? A deformed child with an extreme amount of hair all over the body, called the werewolf syndrome? Or was it an unknown cryptid? Was it an interdimensional creature trapped in our realm and unable to travel back to its own dimension? The phenomenon then changed course in the 1990s with the next wave of sightings. The creature being observed was much bigger, and its appearance was now more wolf-like. The Center for Unexplained Events interviewed an eyewitness about a series of encounters beginning in the spring of 1990. Mark was walking with several friends near where he lived in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, when they heard a noise at a nearby park. He shined his flashlight up towards the park when he was startled by what they observed. In the glow of the flashlight stood a huge dog-like creature that was feeding on an animal. The light made it stand up on its hind legs and turn toward the boys. The creature looked like a man with a dog or more wolf-like face. It quickly ran into the woods, leaving a wet dog-like odor. The boys soon departed after that, and very swiftly. The next day, they found a deer that was eaten in broken branches about 6 feet off the ground. The next encounter took place the following year in the fall of '91. The same eyewitnesses came home from fishing and decided to look for his friends. He drove by an old water company in his neighborhood and found them. They appeared upset, and they stated that they had just spotted the wolf-like creature again. It had just ran to the woods before Mark arrived at the water company. They drove by an old dirt road close to the water company. Mark shined the spotlight down the road and saw the creature standing by an old utility pole. The creature quickly departed after seeing the light shining in its face and fled back into the woodline. The next day, the group went back to the spot looking for evidence. Although they didn't find any physical evidence, the group measured a spike in the utility pole where the creature was standing beside it and measured 7 feet tall. The creature was described as wolf-like, covered in grayish, whitish hair, and its eyes glowed red. The legend, even dating back into the 1950s, of the Dog Boy seemed to center around the idea that a satanic cult or even a coven of witches conjured up the creature to protect the land. Ironically, after an old red abandoned house, which was said to be where the creature was summoned from, was torn down and the sightings appeared to have stopped. What exactly was the Shenango Valley werewolf? Did the sightings really stop, or did people stop reporting them? A second-hand report was given to author Thomas White in the 2000s of a strange beast with dark fur allegedly encountered behind a home near Hermitage. The eyewitness still refuses to disclose any information about the sighting. If you are in Shenango Valley area at night and happen to hear a howl or something moving about in the forest, perhaps you too will encounter the Shenango Valley werewolf. This video concludes our Dogman of Eastern United States, but very soon we will start the Southern United States Dogman Encounter series, where we will touch upon some of the scariest encounters out there. For now, stay in the light and be safe. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like it, be sure to hit that like button and be sure to leave a comment. Subscribe to my channel for more terrifying cryptid videos and other horror stories.